Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it.
I mean, how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Hi, welcome back. It's another episode of the Koala podcast. And in this episode, we're speaking to Neil Cartwright in the UK. I came across everybody like I do at the moment on LinkedIn, and his company has put together a report cross-jurisdictional on medical cannabis and driving, which I found it quite bizarre that nobody had done it up to this point, 2026. So I thought, well, let's get in touch and talk about what Neil learned about the different conditions for medical cannabis and driving in different jurisdictions, mainly common law ones around the world, particularly on topic for anybody listening, soon after publication of this podcast, because New South Wales is, the way that most press have reported, it's already happened, but they are considering, after rolling out their rugby league player and their ex-military veteran and lots of people in suits and normal people, et cetera, that cannabis is sort of safe for driving. But of course, if you look closely at the rules, and I won't go too much into this, but New South Wales police have got their claws in as much as they possibly can, and you have to give away 90% of your life in order to be able to get in the car and drop your kids to school. But that's New South Wales for you. Anybody who knows New South Wales will be fully conversant with the way that the system works there. Neil, sorry, a little bit of a
no worries
on when I start the show because I'm getting older and more cynical by the minute.
I think we all are.
Welcome to the show, and look, it's an interesting piece of work because I say everybody talks about it with minimal knowledge, and then they all sort of like hone in on what they think applies to them as a personal human being, but they're not looking at the overall picture and how medical cannabis and driving can be something that can be sorted out. And I want to put this in quite early. There's a lot of people who've been driving on cannabis for a long time before testing evolved anywhere on the planet. I used to actually, I'll quite happily admit this, in the late 80s and early 90s, every time I got in the car in London when the traffic was much worse, I'd always have a spliff. And it made driving in London a far more pleasant and relaxing experience. Now people may, that's dangerous, but actually I drove better in London under those conditions than other people would like me to believe that I did, because that's sometimes how cannabis works. Probably doesn't work if you're on an autobahn in the same way. But I just wanted to throw that in because I don't have this fear of saying that I use cannabis when it is illegal as a recreational drug, and I got in a car and drove, and I've had two scrapes in my life, and both times were not, under the influence of any substance or another. So I think people, make a big hoo-ha about medical cannabis, some people, and, it'd be interesting to look at the numbers, because I read a bizarre number the other day. I don't know where I saw that, but something about, it was a health thing in Singapore where the health ministry found somebody who said that, 91% increases in car crashes in Colorado since, it just, where I don't know who you paid for that or who somebody paid for it for you to lift that and then put it in official government information. So, Neil, what led you, I suppose, or what, to why driving in cannabis?
Yeah, well, I think you've touched on there's three big areas here. One is the personal. Because like you, I know a lot of people who say they are perfectly fine to drive. I'm in the other camp. If I consume cannabis, there's no way I can drive. I know I can't. I'm impaired. I have driven when I'm slightly after a couple of draws, and I'm paranoid. I'm paranoid beyond belief.
That's interesting, because it's for me. Like if I get a new delivery, 90s London, I got a new delivery of skunk in the first day. Yeah, I'm not going to get in a car. but by 10 days and you've had a spliff a couple of hours beforehand.
Well, and there's a lot of people who take cannabis for anxiety, and they find driving causes anxiety,
Right.
and so they find that cannabis relaxes. I've also heard people who they have what's called racing brain. We might call it ADHD, but they call it racing brain, and they say it's only after they've had a spliff that they are calm enough to drive. I hear these stories, but let's for the purposes of this call, I guess, put the personal to one side, because ultimately the law is very clear.
Exactly.
It's and in the UK it's 2 micrograms per liter, in Germany 3.5, in other countries it's 0. So every country has its limit, and that is black and white. You do the test. If you're over, you're in trouble. The debate, therefore, is what should that level be and how long, because THC stays in your system far longer than alcohol. I think we all, most of us know that as well. Alcohol is your body gets rid of it after a few hours. You can be drunk in the evening, drive the next morning. You might still be over the limit, but THC can stay in your system for 4 or 5 days. That is a problem if you are a medical cannabis prescriber. And I've seen lots of reports on an individual country level. What I thought was, let's compare different countries. And one of the immediate things that came out of that was, I think whichever country you live in, you're always, this country, why are we so bad? Why are we so backwards? One of the surprises was that the UK actually comes out of it very, very well. The UK is one of the only countries in the world that has a statutory defense, which is, if you are a medical cannabis patient, you can argue that if you weren't impaired, then you are within your rights as a prescriber. That isn't, as a result of this analysis, it turned out, to my surprise, that isn't the case in every country. Australia being one of the primary examples, which has got the biggest ratio of patients and one of the most restrictive driving laws. So you've got a big contradiction in Australia. In Germany, it was zero tolerance up until a few years ago. And then they've actually taken a very pragmatic view, which is, rather than saying what is the minimum amount, which is the UK, which is the 2 milligrams per litre, micrograms, they have now said it's 3.5. And the idea being, it's not what is the minimum, it's what is the amount that makes you impaired.
Well, this is the discussion, and
it's like,
it seems science and technology still, it's like, I hate the comparison with alcohol, but it's the only comparison we have.
I mean, it's the closest one.
This concept of impairment is pretty new. It's only like 5 years old, I would suggest. And then the technology that defines over or under the limit, as you said, sets numbers, but the technology can't define impairment. And that's always going to be the issue with cannabis compared to alcohol.
It is, absolutely is. And as I said, the personal, whether you think you're impaired or not is the personal. On the law side, you do still have this problem. Which is, people that have different tolerance levels to THC. Now, there is a scientific reason for that. It's well understood, to do with the CB1, CB2 receptors. As you take on more THC, your body actually starts to cut off dopamine, the neurotransmitters. There's a reason why you become tolerant to THC. As you become more tolerant, it could be argued that threshold moves. that when you first start taking, that's hypothetical. I first start taking cannabis, I feel very stoned, I'm impaired. The longer I take cannabis, the more tolerant I become to it, the more cannabis I can have. If I have a low amount, I don't feel impaired. So you do become tolerant. How does the law shift that number according to your individual patient? Well, if there was a scientific way to do it, then fantastic. And I think there are people. I do remember seeing quite recently that there are companies claiming that they can detect whether someone is impaired. Whether that is true or not, we'll have to go through the tests. Like everything else, it'll have to be evidence-based. But yeah, it's this moving threshold. And so that is a problem. But you've still got countries like Canada. We think of Canada as being a very open market. It's got dispensaries, recreational is legal, and yet it's got very intolerant driving laws. So again, similar to Australia, big discrepancy between number of patients and their laws.
And what are their rules in Canada? I mean, what do they set the numbers at?
Yeah. Canada, 2 to 5 micrograms per milliliter, but you haven't got a medical defense. So they've got a very low tolerance. It's a similar tolerance level to the UK and Czech Republic. So it's 2 micrograms. It's the minimum threshold, but you haven't got a medical defense. So in the UK, you can show your prescription pot and argue I wasn't impaired. Obviously, that is.
So yeah, I mean, being the law, this sets up a whole lot of different questions. So I mean, I just asked you about Canada, but it immediately shoots me back to the UK. You show your card, I'm not impaired. The traffic police, then make a decision that you either are or aren't impaired. I presume if they think you're not, you're back in the car and off you go. What's the process if they decide you
No, it would still have to go to court.
It would.
So if the police do catch it, I mean, look, if you've just had an accident, you are going to be very, very hard pushed to say you weren't impaired, even if you think you weren't. If you were pulled over because you've had a missing tail light or something, you might be able to argue I wasn't impaired. Obviously, if you've had an accident, forget it. So it has to be under certain situations where you get pulled over. They do a blood test. But you'll still be arrested. It's a defense in court. The police can't just let you go if you show the pot. They might do if they use their discretion, but don't bank on it. Don't think that is going to let you off.
That's your get out of jail free card.
It's not. But it might save you having your license taken away from you if you can prove it in court. You can't do that in Canada. You haven't even got that defense. If you're over the threshold, that is it. Doesn't matter whether you're a patient or not. So all these different countries, they all have different. They do what drives me mad. I'm sure it does with you as well. That every country insists that it has to do its own tests.
Well, coming from Australia,
why can't you just look at Germany?
They always have to do everything. So you've looked at Germany, the Czech Republic, Australia, Canada, the UK. What other countries?
I looked at 6. Now this brings me on to the third part of this, which was the AI side, which I know is a huge area in itself. The jury is out as far as AI goes in terms of its accuracy, etc. But we are building our own knowledge base. So every bit of information that goes into this knowledge base is verified and accurate. And what that means is that I can do these comparisons across countries. and I'll be doing more and more of them. If I wanted to do a comparison against 10 countries, that's something else. We constantly get updates. So the New South Wales update will update our knowledge base automatically. So using these new tools, we are able to do these side-by-side comparisons, and we're going to be doing them across a range of different areas. So dosing. Every country has its own dosing regime. Why there isn't just one? Every country has to do it. How are you eligible? The eligibility checks? The UK has quite a high bar in order for you to be eligible for cannabis. Australia doesn't, and you can see the effect on the number of prescribers. In the UK, 65 million population, we have roughly 70,000 cannabis patients. Australia, 25 million population, 700,000 cannabis patients, half the size, 10 times the numbers. The onboarding, the eligibility is very important, plays a huge role. And we can start to compare different countries and their eligibility, their routes to access, and say which ones have the best or the worst laws, depending on your point of view. But what really makes a difference? And the AI makes it possible to do these country comparisons far quicker than if you're doing it manually. The question, of course, is, it hallucinates, doesn't it, AI? Yes, it does, when you are using a general AI such as OpenAI, Gemini, Grok, etc. What these AIs are doing is looking at all of the information they've got, which is the good and the bad, and then they're trying to determine what the answer should be. And so sometimes they get it wrong. Our AI only has information, it only has good information. It only has.
I'm halfway through the same project.
They cannot just make up information. They don't make it up. They get it wrong.
Well, I'm in the same project as you, because I'm putting together every piece of primary legislation on the planet to do with cannabis law. So it's only government information that enters our system, and therefore, and it then, as you say, you use tools to run can't hallucinate on that. And if you, most of the hallucination, as we know, and I report on law and technology the whole time, is due to lazy human editors, or in my case, lazy human lawyers who think it's a tool so they don't do any work. But the first thing I learned using it is I'm a publisher, I'm an editor. I check everything. It goes and finds it, and then I check it, and then if it's incorrect, I take it out, and if it's correct, so it finds what you need and can compare and can contrast, but you still need that human editorial oversight. And I suggest even in 5 years' time, when it's at apparently, we're all going to be slaves of the AI, we'll still be having to tell them, how to make us a cup of tea, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And without pointing, the obvious, the books are wrong as well. If the author of the book got something wrong, guess what? Books are wrong. We have this strange idea that a book, no, if it's in a book, it must be right. No, it can be wrong.
I don't know. I was brought up in a household where everybody said, "Don't believe everything you read." I mean, I thought that was a standard English phrase that taught you to analyze what you read, whether you
analyze what you read. If it's been generated by AI, then check it. But what we are finding is there are ways to mitigate the anything that's incorrect. So you've got a very clean set of data now. When it comes to driving, traveling advice, dosing, cultivation, it's all in the knowledge base now. And that knowledge base enables anyone to go, how do I get a prescription in Czech Republic? How do I open a clinic? I'm a supplier. How do I get my product from my country into Australia? What are the export laws? We've got state by state laws for the US. We've broken it down by state.
Yeah,
so
we're working on the same
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
So ours is available. It's there. It can be used to generate these reports. And I know we've sort of
what's the name of the front end so people can go and have a look at it?
Cannavec, which is cannabis vector store. So cannavec.ai. Anyone can register. You can see what the laws are in any country, and I should round it off with this one other aspect. At the end of this analysis of the 6 countries, I asked the AI a question, which is, can you suggest a policy? What would a reasonable driving policy look like, taking into account the rights of the patient and the rights of citizens to know that our roads are safe? Nobody wants
chaos.
Impaired people, right? No one wants that, but medical patients have a threat, blah blah blah. And it writes this policy taking all this into account. And I've done this before, where you say, write a drugs policy, write an immigration policy, write a nuclear disarmament policy. And it comes up with these policies where if you say, you know what, if I had to vote on one of the parties in the UK or this, I know which one I'd vote for, because it is so reasonable, it's so tolerant, it takes everything into account.
And again, because it can do the compare.
Do we vote for AI rather than the humans? Because I would rather vote for this.
I mean, well, it's interesting you say that, because I mean, obviously the big party pushing ideas on, some might call it drug liberalization, are the Greens in the UK. But I find that their young policymakers are working on data and ideas that were the sort of thing I was reading at university in the 1980s. And it makes me wonder, the level of research skills and knowledge management that these people have, that they then feed through to their front people in the house or on the doorstep, and they're really misdirecting people in the conversation from the very get-go, whether it be negative on the Tories and reform side, or whether it be just don't talk to us about it, like Labour. Seems to be the Labour approaches. We just, there's too many other things to think about. So the Greens are pushing an idea, which I have no problem with, but it seems that they, Westminster and those connected with them don't seem to be aware of how they can cross-compare jurisdictional information now to look for better outcomes, and then as they put the human in to create the UK cultural decisions that would work, that would work in Greater London. Because I mean, that's the other thing, is something probably works better in Greater London than it does in Cornwall, and the police already sort of know this, but they just don't have the numbers or the data to work with. So it seems to me that the days of policymakers or advisors who are earning lots of money, they're still struggling to be the people who tell these parties what they should be saying to appeal to the general populace. But the reality is, you only need to hire a couple of smart 22-year-olds who don't care one way or the other, and you're going to get much better policy using the technology and the knowledge that's already available across universities, government databases, and Hansards, essentially.
It's true, and it just strikes me that the policies are just very clean, very reasonable, because they just strip out the ideology. When you strip out ideology, which includes media reactions, because of course in the UK we've got a very outspoken right-leaning media who take a very dim view of drug reform for whatever reason.
Sells newspapers.
And
That's the main reason.
yeah, well,
Sells
and
newspapers.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. You scare you make people angry every day, as Paul Dackey used to say. When you strip all that ideology out, and AI just looks at balance, create a policy that balances the rights of this group with the concerns of this group. It it just does a very clean, considered, reasonable go at drafting something that.
So look,
So
you looked at driving first. You looked at driving first because it's obviously an easy thing to attract people, and everybody understands it because 90% of people have to get in the car every day. How about some of the more tricky aspects of cannabis regulation?
Yeah,
And especially with regard to the UK, as I said before, is a country that doesn't really want to talk about it very much, being very British about it. Let's not talk about it,
right.
and maybe it'll go away. But you know, I've now lived out of the UK for a long time, but I've been back and forth a lot and lived 2 years here, 2 years there. And the one thing I noticed as a regular cannabis smoker since I was 14 years old is every time I go back, market price in real terms has dropped by 95%. So I pay the same for an ounce of whatever it is. Well, I couldn't afford an ounce when I was younger. Let's say a quarter, because English people understand that. I pay the same now as I did then. So that's telling me that as the Americans call it, the legacy market, let's be straight up, it's the black market, have such control over the distribution channels within the UK and such control over the criminal justice system, it's completely blocking it up. Do you think AI might be able to actually persuade some brighter politicians to understand what ignoring regulation is doing to the country? Everybody's saying broken Britain, and yeah, I do believe half of it is because they just let this stuff run riot and they will not deal with it.
It's whether politicians will allow themselves to believe AI or to trust AI to say, I will go with AI, rather than I am an instinct this is the thing. Politicians I've got a gut feel, I've got a feeling. I'm in tune with the British people. Me alone have this connection with the British people, and I don't need data. I don't need AI. I know. And that's what how many politicians now can we think of?
All of them, literally all of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Andy's about to come in, but as soon as he starts speaking, I'm hearing the same thing as I've heard before. I mean, I liked him more when I didn't know what he was saying.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Slight digression, very slight.
I know.
I was listening
to
the
Karma Koala is all about digression.
I was listening to Michael Gove, very senior Conservative politician, a few years ago, and he was talking about how the Conservative government were going to make big decisions based on data. Yeah. Bearing in mind this was about 10 years ago. And my first thought was, so that's a tacit admission that at the moment you're making these big decisions not based on data.
Yeah.
What are these decisions based on if they're not based on data? Oh, conviction. Great. Yeah, this is, oh my God. So are politicians going to allow themselves to admit that they use AI to come to policy decision? In my view, no. But will they be forced to do it when people like me, like you, like everyone who listens, who reads it, starts looking at AI policy and going, do you know what? That is way better. That's way better. And at some point, some party is going to grasp this and say, our policy is AI. And then we all go, oh my God, I'd much rather go for an AI that has considered every data point. It's got all the data in front of it, including how many prisoners, how much it costs us as a society, the genuine concerns some people do have about health and addiction and the negatives associated. Yeah, take all that into account. Yes. And when you do, the AI comes up with a reasonable policy that says people do have rights to take
And
drugs.
if that policy still has to become legislation, still has to go through supposedly a democratic house, and no piece of legislation has never been not amended at some point when conditions change. But with these tools, we can work out much quicker when these conditions change, so we can apply sensible solutions earlier rather than later. So look, to the likes of you and I, and we've only got a few minutes left, it all seems blatantly obvious. But
it's funny that, yeah.
but explaining something,
all out.
explaining some of this stuff. I mean, it's just like, I've been reading all the Southampton stuff this week, and again, if you just looked at a bit of data, and the only people who have access to the data are actually generally the police, and they've been saying, just calm it all down, because we know what the numbers are, and it's just human beings being human beings, and
that's right.
Emotion plays we're primates, so emotion is playing too large a part in the decisions we're making, and I think cannabis and driving is quite a good Trojan horse to try and explain some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, there's, I think there's across the board, you're starting to see people who suffer from, life-changing conditions as well, fibro, endometriosis, multiple sclerosis, whose lives are demonstrably better using cannabis. Not even borderline. It's demonstrable, easily to show that that's better. And you're starting to see people coalesce around not only online communities, but starting to use AI. It's one of my favorite quotes was the Manic Street Preachers. I used to work for Sony Music, and I did the Manic Street Preachers website. And one of their songs, Designed for Life, has this beautiful opening line: libraries gave us power. And what they meant was, the working classes didn't have access to encyclopedias and journals. And so libraries were the first time that people, ordinary people, had access to the information. This is what AI is giving us. It means that people like me, who are passionate about this, now have access to information that we can use, and we can put together a really grounded, well thought out, considered policy white paper, whatever you want to call it. And those can be debated and shared, and people can now have access to that information that they could never have access to before. And I think this has got to be a good thing. AI is going to divide society. There's a whole load of shit coming our way, but there's a whole load of good it can do as well. We have to balance the two.
Well, it's, we're about to got 2 minutes left, but it's basically, the Tim Berners-Lee view of technology, the internet and knowledge, versus Silicon Valley's current view, which is it is designed to generate revenue, and those two will always clash up against one another. Let's hope that AI is a step towards what he was thinking, more than a step towards what some of those people running Silicon Valley are thinking at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. Don't bear in mind that AI is not owned by those companies. Those companies are exploited.
Yeah, well, they're the ones who have the money to be able to develop it. Yeah.
You can buy it off the shelf. Anyone can get hold of these servers and build their own knowledge base and use AI for their own purposes. The big AI companies are spending billions to dominate it.
Dominate the space. Well, look, Neil,
there's a whole load of stuff we can all
sorry
be
to
doing
say,
with it.
we've already run out of time. We're down to a minute.
No worries.
We could go on forever, but I will come back to you
Yeah.
and talk about more cannabis comparisons as they come through across jurisdictions, because it's a project I'm working on as well. So I'm really interested in the discussion. So thanks a lot for being on the Karma Koala podcast.
You're welcome. Yeah, good to be on, Sean. Thanks a lot.
Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it. I mean, how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, great, Barry, a reefer.